Okay. So we have established, just a quick review, since there are some new students in the class, we have established certain basic principles. Number one, that Hashem has, it says in the Navi, Hashem made neshamas. Neshamas. Neshama, what is a neshama? Neshama is the life within. So Hashem creates the life within every living thing. But this is unusual, an unusual expression, neshamas, because we're familiar with the term neshama. There was a shliach said to you, aha, you have a neshama. You never thought about that before. I remember when I was about 11, 12 years old, I had a cousin who was very, very bright. And he said to me, you know what I discovered? I said, what's that? Here's Anna. He said he discovered that he thinks. I thought, wow. I never knew that I never thought about the fact that I thought. And there was a great French philosopher who based his whole philosophy on that. Who knows who it was? Anybody know? Descartes, yes. I think, therefore I am. That defines my definition. What do we call that in Hasidus? We call that the intellectual soul. Nefesh HaSeichli. So it's a part of the neshama. It's an aspect of the neshama, the thinking part of the neshama. Well, what we learned in chapter 1, we didn't get there yet. But the thinking part of the neshama, we'll get there in chapter 5. The thinking part of the active part of the neshama is called the nefesh. And when it says neshamas, I made all the neshamas, means all the living things with everything. So we think the word neshama also means our special Jewish neshama. So if so, why is it plural? I only have one, not two. So here is Shoshana Guido from Thornhill. Well, we have a full roster today. Bli Ayin Hara. Girls, I've been teaching in this yeshiva for I don't know how long, donkey's years. Never had such a full class. This is the biggest class I ever had. And I know almost all your names. How do you like that?
Hey.
Just one name I'm having a lot of trouble with, Malka Levan. I can't get that name into my head for some reason.
Yeah, she's interesting.
Okay, yeah, interesting case.
Yeah. She's like the Hesed case. Yeah.
So we ask right away, why does it say neshamas? Not just meaning all the living things that there are in the whole world, but referring to us. I only have one neshama, so therefore, right away, the Tanya, the Alter Rebbe, tells us that this refers to two nefashos. So we have neshamas and we have nefashos. Let's write that on the board. Neshamas, which is the root of this is the neshama, and the plural is neshamos. And then he says we have two. We have a nefesh, and we have two of those nefashos, two nefashos. And they all mean soul, they all mean life, but it's different levels. And then in the first chapter, he begins speaking about one of these levels, which is the nefesh mitzad haklippa. We spent a lot of time speaking extensively about what is klippa. Klippa is the external shell, not the repository of life, but in fact, we come to see that klippa hides the life. The shell, like the protective covering on the acorn, protects it, but hides it. And even in the level of the nuts, we have shells within shells, like in the peanut. You have the woody outer shell, and then you have the brown skin inside, which is edible. So we have edible klippas, edible shells, and inedible shells. Shells that if we eat them, they're very damaging to our insides. They cut and you can't digest them. And the first nefesh that he talks about in this chapter, which we learned, you may not remember, it said we actually did read the words. It says is in the blood. It's enclosed in the blood. And we call that the animal soul, the living soul, the human soul, the vital soul, the basic living energy within us. So in Hebrew, that's nefesh habahamis. A behema is an animal. And every animal has this life. We also have it, and it's in our blood. Where is your blood? Everywhere. So that's basically what you are. That's the basic life energy within us. And then he described, the Alter Rebbe describes the four basic elements, physical elements that everything is made up of, and that they have spiritual counterparts, which is the way that this animal, vital human soul, it's perfectly human, perfectly normal, expresses itself in its self-centered ways, self-seeking ways, and they are fire, water, air, and earth. And we learned how these four elements express themselves through our self-centered animal soul, through anger and arrogance and pleasure-seeking and idle talk and negative talk, wasteful, meaningless talk shows. How many people are addicted to talk shows? What do you get from them? Idle talk. We're not here for that. We're here with a purpose. So all that idle talk, it's a distraction from who we are and what we're here for. We are here for a purpose. He doesn't say, just interjecting this so we keep focused on where we're heading. We are here. Our neshama came down into this world in order to convert this world and make it a dwelling place for God, a palace where Hashem can dwell, where he can be at home, where he can feel at home. Why is it everybody wants to have an apartment, a nice place? If you have to share, so you have to share. You pray, you'll have roommates who remember to put the cap back on the toothpaste and do the dishes. Better if you can have your own place and just have guests in from time to time, then you're really in control. And basically you want to have your own home. Everybody wants, you know why you want to have a home? Because Hashem wants to have a home and he creates us in his image. If you're going to have a home, you have to buy, someone has to build it. Someone has to make it. Someone has to design it. Someone has to furnish it. So Hashem gives all that into our hands to make out of the raw material of the world a home where he can be. That's a digression. Okay. And then we digressed further and we spoke about how these same four elements would express themselves in the godly soul. How the fire, which could be anger from the animal soul, can be tremendous enthusiasm and souls on fire, like they say. People, inspired in their devotion to Torah and mitzvahs, and people get such a tremendous pleasure. Water, element of pleasure. Pleasure in helping another person. Pleasure in doing something good and constructive, as opposed to pleasure that's just self-seeking pleasure. Having the most fun possible, yeah. Or saying words that are meaningful, words that can change the world for good. Or instead of the element of earth and the animal soul, which makes a person depressed and unhappy and lazy. So you have earthiness in the godly soul, which is humility, expresses itself as humility and bitul, devotion to loyalty. Like Avram, like we read last week, when Hashem said, take your son, your only son, the one you love, and take him, bring him to me as an offering. And I'm not going to show you where it is. You're going to have to go 3 days. What did he eat during those 3 days? What did he drink? He went on foot, you know. Nobody drove him. He had to carry with him the whole way wood for an offering and a knife and a flame. He had to keep a flame going the whole time. Where's he going to find the matches on a mountaintop? Miles and miles away. He doesn't know where he's going even until he sees the cloud of Hashem on top of the mountain. But he doesn't ask any questions. He just goes. Hashem says go, he goes. That's the element of earthiness in the godly soul. No questions asked. Yes, sir. No, sir. 3 bags full, sir. That's what they say in English. Okay, that's where we're up to.
Can I make the question?
Just hold your question. That's a good question. That's already a question, but just hold your question. I want to finish this chapter
Okay.
because we're almost there. Turn to page 46. At the bottom of page 46, he says something very surprising. We're talking here about the selfish animal soul and all the bad selfish things that it might lead a person to do. And now at the bottom comment on page 46 is something very surprising, that this animal soul also has very good qualities in it. Surprising. Since when are cows and sheep capable of good? We said several times, every creature, every animal creation in the world is created with its own kind of wisdom and knowledge and intuition, knows how to do things that only it knows how to do. And no one else knows how to do this. No birds know, what do birds eat? You ever see birds eating? They peck a little bit here, a little bit there. They find a seed, a tiny seed, and it nourishes them. Wonder, how do they survive? Okay, these are all interesting questions, but this is how Hashem creates every creature with everything that it needs to survive. Okay. But now we share that nature. We also have an animal soul, and we don't expect it to be ethical. Ethical means knowing the difference between right and wrong. So here he says something very surprising, because from this animal soul that we have, there are also good quality, good characteristics of our nature, such as compassion. That's not a little thing. That's a great achievement. Growing up, you have to mature and work on this quality to have a feed, to care for someone other than yourself. And benevolence, to give away the things that are precious to you and share them with people who are in need. And these are part of our animal soul. That is extraordinary. And so we learn from this that there are certain, just like a bird knows how to migrate, Jewish people have these extraordinary qualities of goodness and kindness. Compassion, charitableness. Isn't that a wow? In fact, it says there are certain touchstones in a person's character. If you don't find them, you have to really look into their past of the family. What kind of family are they coming from? a person is cruel and mean, and nasty and selfish, is he really Jewish? We have to find out for sure that this person really is Jewish. Maybe he is, maybe she is, but it's buried. I mean, could be buried very deep. Like we're going to read about the well springs that Yitzchak dug in the wilderness. You had to dig through a lot of earth and stone to get to the water. Sometimes you meet people that you have to dig very, very deep to find out what they really are. But they are. If they're Jewish, it's there. The kindness, the compassion, the benevolence, the charitableness, it's all there. A friend of mine, my first teacher, he told me a story once, Erev Yom Kippur. He finished the davening. We'll just turn that off. Finished the davening, he was walking home to prepare for the holy day, and there's some ditch diggers digging on the street a hole for a sewer pipe to go through. And there's one guy standing there with arms as big as tree trunks. His shirt was cut away because the sleeves were too small for his huge arms, and tattoos all over. And he sees the rabbi walking by, and he says with an East End accent in London, "Have a good fast, Rabbi." What's that? He says, "That's right, I'm Jewish too." You see? And I think I told you about this book that I saw once. I didn't keep it in the house. I didn't want to have it at home. Just attracted my attention once when I saw it. It was a book with a picture of a gun on the cover. And it was a study, a very interesting study about the early Jewish mafia here in New York. People came from Europe, they had no money, and some of them were smart, and some of them sold newspapers, and some of them opened candy stores, and some of them opened whatever they could. And some of them weren't so smart, but they had muscles, and they started a protection agency. You know, you come to a mafia style, you come to a store owner, you say, "We'd like to sell you some insurance." "I don't need any insurance." "Oh yeah, maybe you do." And the next day his window's broken. We'll make sure it doesn't happen again. We'll get just, you know. So there was a whole mafia, and he wrote a book about it. What was the title of the book? But he was good to his mother. He was good to his mother. So this is what we see, that these, by the way, just to finish off this thought, that these are the touchstone qualities of the Jewish character, that the Jewish person by nature, like I said, like a bird knows how to migrate and a spider knows how to spin a web, Jewish people are by nature kind and forgiving, merciful, and fasten your seatbelts, modest, which really goes against the American society today, where if you're not immodest, you're a nerd. Something's wrong with you. Just say a bracha. Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam she'achol. And modesty means modest the way you dress, modest the way you behave, the modest the way you carry yourself in public, the modest the way you speak, the modest the way you listen to things, and modest the way you at what you look at, and what you allow yourself to look at, what you don't allow yourself to look at. That you turn away from something that's immodest because you don't want to, you know, when you see something that's immodest, how do you get it out? Or when you hear something nasty about somebody with some lashon hara, and you've heard it, you're prejudiced for life. That affects you. So these are the three prime qualities of the Jewish people. And here he's saying something extraordinary. This comes from the selfish soul, the animal soul, which comes from Klippa. And now he defines it on top of page 47. Very important definition. The Klippa is called Noga. Klippa is Noga. What does Noga mean? Noga, we had the word last week. The word Noga means to shine, because, and what we're going to learn is that this Klippa Noga is the source of life. Hashem sends life to everything in the world, comes through Klippas Noga if the thing is kosher. So all the things that we can interact with get their life through Klippas, the Klippa that's called Noga. And the secret is that if it comes from Klippas Noga, we can use it and we can extract from it the life and return that life to its source. But there are 3 other levels of Klippa, which are lower down. They are more severe. They are too hard for us to deal with. You know, like you can eat the roasted walnut. You can eat the walnut when it's roasted, but you can't eat the shell, because the shell comes from a different level of life. So when the Torah gives us prohibitions and tells us you can't do this, you can't do that, this activity is wrong, you're not allowed to steal, you know, you're not allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do that. It's not restricting you, it's telling you, don't drink the poison. Good morning. Whoa, we have to find you a seat. Let's take that chair and put it on the end of the table there. That way you won't block anybody. No. There. No, you're gonna block someone there. Go ahead.
Okay.
Side this Rappaport, right there. Okay, very good. Yeah, excellent. You are?
Yeah,
Bina. Oh, welcome, Bina. Bina Bodkin.
that's me.
That's you. Where are you from?
I grew up in Massachusetts.
Massachusetts? Boston?
Mhm.
Okay, welcome. You complete the roster. All present and accounted for. Are you living in Crown Heights now, or you're not commuting?
I just moved here, last week.
Mazel tov, mazel tov. When you change your place, you change your mazel for good and for blessing.
Thank you.
Should be that way. Okay, can we give her a text? Any extra books around, books? We're on page 47, Bina Bodkin. So, you know, I mentioned this example before. When I was a kid, if you fell and cut yourself, mommy would put iodine on your cut, which burned. And on the bottle of iodine was kept in the medicine cabinet in the bathroom. There was a skull and crossbones to warn you, don't drink this and keep it away from children. Because if you drink it, it's going to burn your innards, your insides, and it's poison. It could kill you. So all the prohibitions from the Torah are like that skull and crossbones. They're telling us, this is not interesting for you. This is not beneficial for you. This is poison, spiritual poison for you. So stay away, because other things you can elevate. The Torah says you can say a bracha on them and elevate them and return their life to its source in holiness. But these things are too powerful for you. You cannot elevate them. So bacon, you cannot elevate it. You can eat bacon and eggs, heaven forbid, and go to Rabbi Majeski's Mimer class, and it won't help you. On the contrary, you'll be cynical. It will affect your feelings. It will affect the way you think. It will affect the way you feel. The great story along these lines, the first mimer that was said by our Rebbe, the very first mimer, Bossi Lagani, he told a story about every Rebbe, about the great kindness and love of every Rebbe for other Jewish people. And the story he told about the fourth Rebbe, Rebbe Shmuel, called Maharash, is how even though he lived a very short life, but he took a whole week out of his life to travel from Russia to Paris. And in Paris, he checked into the most expensive hotel, which was frequented by kings and princes. And he took a room on the most expensive floor, which was the same floor as the casino. This was before the days of elevators. The first elevator was soon to be built in the Eiffel Tower. It was just under construction at this time, middle of the 19th century. And he went into the casino. Imagine this rabbi. He was a kind of heavy set and wearing a long coat, the Prince Edward kapota that we wear with a hat probably, or at least a yarmulke, and the beard. And he goes over to the gaming table where there's a young man playing cards with wine, a glass of wine in front of him, and probably women around. There were always women around these places. And he watches him playing cards, which must have been very unnerving for this young socialite. And at a break in the game, when they're like reshuffling the cards at a certain break, they're gambling. What you gamble in a casino. So at a pause in the gambling, he steps over to the young man and he says to him in French, because he spoke French. And he says to him, "Young man, that wine is not kosher wine. Non-kosher wine will dull your heart and confuse your mind. Be a Jew." Maybe he wasn't sure if he'd understood him properly. He probably had a Russian accent in his French. So he repeated himself, "Young man, non-kosher wine will dull the feelings in your heart and confuse your mind. Be a Jew." And then he stepped back. And he was so excited, so at this and what was taking place, that he sat down in the nearest chair, which he supposedly, quote unquote, did not realize was the elevator. Because in that hotel that had many stories, they didn't have elevators yet. But if you sat down in that chair, this is for kings and princes, the servants came and picked you up and took you up to your room. So they came and they picked him up, which I think is highly symbolic, because he was saving this Jewish soul. And he said afterwards that he took this week out of his very short life to go to Paris to confront this person, because he was a very, very high neshama, which had fallen from birth deep into klippas, deep into the non-permissible areas of life. And he said nobody else could have schlepped him out of there. He had to go himself to do it. A little later that night, anyway, they picked him up. No, put me down. They put him back down. He went to his room. In the middle of the night, this young man came to the Rebbe's room. The secretaries didn't know who he was. They didn't want to let him in. The Rebbe spoke with him through the whole night, and he became a Baal Tshuva. He became the head of a very outstanding family, a Jewish family in Paris. So that the point of that story is, that I was bringing out, is that non-kosher wine will have a negative effect on your heart and on your mind, as all non-kosher food will do. Because the food you eat and the drinks you drink become your flesh and blood, which is in your heart and in your mind. It affects you. So the Torah tells you to keep the system pure. Okay. So the Klippus Noga is the source. We're going to learn this in chapter 6. Klippus Noga is this chapter 6 and 7. It's the source of all the kosher things. If they're kosher, that means they are fit to be part of our service of God. Now the explanation for this on page 47. This klippa is referred to in Jewish mysticism as the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Because this is the source of all life that could be good or evil. Bina, you look very familiar. How do I know you?
I've been here
Off and
all the
on.
time. I just wasn't able to come in the mornings because of the distance, but
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Jewish neshama, what he's saying here is now that the nefesh, the basic animal, vital human soul, which we have in us because we're Jewish, comes from Klippas Noiga. And you're going to ask a question. Well, what about everybody else? Do they also have that? Okay, so please fasten your seatbelts because sometimes people have a lot of trouble with this in our liberal day and age. Because what he's going to say now is that that's a Jewish quality. It's not a non-Jewish quality. And even though we do find these qualities of charitableness and goodness and kindness and compassion amongst non-Jews, he's going to say, what he says here is basically these things, however, are self-centered. So everything in this world gets its life, the good things from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Therefore, we can extract the good from it and we can avoid the evil from it. How do we elevate things that are, the Torah calls them evil? By abstaining from them. By not doing them, we elevate them. So the souls of the nations of the world emanate from the other three klippas. Now, we saw last week at length that there were four worlds, which correspond to the four letters of the name of God. We learned about the spiders, Zeliumazeh, one thing opposite the other. So too in the world of klippa. Klippa is the hiding of godliness. We're also going to have four levels. The highest level, of course, like the counterpart of the Yud of holiness, which is the first letter of God's name, the counterpart is Klippas Noga, which could become part of holiness. But the three lower levels of the three lower worlds where godliness is more hidden and even more hidden, almost totally hidden, is the source of life of crocodiles and serpents and caterpillars and creepy crawly and cruelty and stealing and adultery and all these bad things get their life from the lower murder, from the lower level, three lower level klippas. So therefore, we're told and commanded to stay away from them because they're not part of what we can accomplish. But by not participating with them, even though everybody in the class does it, we elevate it. Okay, so here the three unclean klippas contain no good whatsoever, depending on how low they are. As is written in Eitz Chaim. Now we learned this. What is Eitz Chaim? Who remembers? Eitz Chaim means in Hebrew the book of the tree of life, as opposed to the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Who wrote the book called Eitz Chaim? It's in your notes. It's in your notes. Chaim Vital. The book of life, the Eitz Chaim, and the fruit of the book of life is the pre-Eitz Chaim, the fruit of the book of life. What does it contain? It's the only book that contains and records the teachings of Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, who was the Moshe Rabbeinu of his generation. And Rabbi Chaim Vital is like Rabbi Akiva of his generation. And what does he say there? He says there, yes, we do find all these good qualities amongst non-Jews, but with the proviso that underneath it all is a feeling of self-satisfaction and selfishness and
Instead-
pride, feeling I'm doing good things now. I'm doing a good thing.
Instead of,
Like we find that, what's the greatness of Abraham? He was willing to sacrifice his son. Well, we find other religions where people have martyred themselves, burn themselves up like Buddhists, or they blow themselves up like Muslims for their ideals. But they have a motive. They have a motive. They do it because they think they're going to go to heaven. A friend of mine was a humorist when Muslims started blowing themselves up. So he's a he was a humorist from Mad Magazine. He said, yes, because they think they're told they're going to go to heaven and they're going to have a life of eternal pleasure with 70 virgins at their disposal, that they can just keep on doing what they want. He says, but they overlook one fact, that all these 70 virgins are 70 years old. So that it just underlined the whole idea that the goodness of the nations is basically self-seeking, as opposed to Avram Avinu. Whereas Avram Avinu, when Hashem told him to take his son as an offering, number one is it made no sense whatsoever. His whole life, Avram was now 137 years old. He had devoted his life to teaching people about the kindness and goodness of Hashem. And now Hashem told him, take your son, take your future, take your whole destiny, which is to teach the world about the unity of God, and sacrifice him. And that was common in those days. Well, we often learn that the point of this, one of the points of the whole thing was to teach people that Hashem doesn't want human sacrifice. But Avram didn't know that. But he did it, even though it was completely against his nature and made absolutely no sense. And he didn't do it for any personal satisfaction. He did it just because Hashem said, just to attach himself to Hashem. And even not to attach himself to Hashem, because his whole being was just bottled, just subservient to God. He was a chariot for God. A taxi goes where the taxi driver wants it to go. And that's the difference. And now to say something like this, you have to have a lot of guts. Because it is very, very powerful. And a lot of people get very upset when they read this. Sometimes I'm even nervous about teaching it because I never know who's going to get all upset about it. Because we are liberals, Jews are kind, and we project our kindness onto others, and we think the whole world is kindly. And unfortunately, it's not necessarily so. And so you have to have a basis to know that what you're saying is true. How do we know? Here's another principle, girls. How do we know anything is true?
look in the Torah.
We have to pin it down to something it says in the Torah, or in Psalms, or in the prophets. Yes, Shoshana.
I just have a question. So
Loud.
when somebody converts, is their animal soul transformed from the lower level klipa to klipa noga, or did they already have that klipa noga because it says like a convert that converts? What happens? to
Yeah,
the
that's a very
convert?
good question, very deep question. I'll ask it tomorrow, okay?
Okay.
Because we're almost finished with the chapters. Let's just push on through. So we can pin it down because it says we have the Gemara. Now, just like we accept the written Torah from Mount Sinai, we have to know that the oral Torah is also from Mount Sinai. And when it says something in the Mishnah or in the Gemara, that's it. That's our source. That's what we can know. That's the rock that we can stand on it and not get washed away. So what does it say in the Gemara, in Baba Basra, that the kindness of the nations is a sin? Actually, is quoting Mishli from Shlomo HaMelech. It's quoting the book of Proverbs. Chesed le'umim chatos. The kindness of the nations is a sin. I remember reading a book by Stern, 18th century literature. That's where I started off in my studies. And it's very, very sweet the way he describes these wealthy people, landed people, not landlords, just aristocracy, upper class, not feudal landlords, but upper class. So these two people are talking, and every now and then the servant comes in and with some news. And every time the servant comes in with some news or a cup of tea or some biscuits, whatever it may be, he gives them a coin. Very nice, it's generous, and he feels very good about it. And the reader feels good about it. But that's what he says here. The kindness is selfish, self-seeking. As Charles Dickens wrote the famous line at the end of A Tale of Two Cities, where this drunkard, wastrel, you could argue about this and say, well, no, maybe he was really deep down always good, but he was a lookalike, and he took the place of some aristocrat who was about to be guillotined in the after French Revolution, Madame Defarge. And he says, there's a far better place I go, there's a far better thing that I do now than I've ever done. A far better place I go to now than I've ever known. So there's this element of, it's going to be good for me. And what he's saying here is an extraordinary statement that a Jewish person has, every Jewish person has this in him, that they can do something totally with no ulterior motive whatsoever. Just for Hashem. Hashem wants. Thank you very much.
That's very strong.
Huh?